welcome, welcome, welcome. I am super excited to be here this afternoon with you, Joanna. For anyone that's online, I'd like to welcome Dr. Joanna Kuyawa, who is a PhD scholar and author on all things divine feminine, best-selling Amazon author of the Jerusalem Diaries, Searching for the Lost Tomb of Jesus, Journaling to Find the Lost Goddess Within, or is it Journaling to Manifest the Lost Goddess Within, and also Spiritual Detective. And Joanna, I have been following your work for a couple of years now. I often pop onto your blogs and certainly find your writings through the Rebel Society. And I only for the first time the other day jumped onto your website and found you describe yourself as a spiritual detective. And I think you had me at spiritual detective. My nickname is actually a tantric ninja, you know, like I stealth look for information and truths. And we've just been talking, you know, a few minutes ago, and there is so much information out there in the world around, you know, what is truth? And we're finding there's so much that is so close to truth, and yet it's not quite the truth, which leads me on to... We've got a little feedback. Is that okay? Can anyone chime in and see if the sound is okay and let us know? Yeah, so I reached out to Joanna a couple of weeks ago, you know, through work with the women that I work with through retreats and mentoring around what is the divine feminine and why do we have this kind of feeling around something's not quite right around, you know, this word, the goddess. Is it overused? Is it misused? And so we had a little conversation around this, and I had come up with a topic or a title for this podcast, for this audio, and then Joanna chimed in and she said, why don't we call it Seductress, Femme, Fatale, Adventures and Misadventures of the Goddess? So I want to welcome you, first of all, Joanna, and I really want to ask you, how did you come up with this brilliant title?
Thank you, Natalie, and I'm really happy to be here with you and with your guests. So, and thank you for the kind words. So why did I come up with this title? Because I think that, yes, the word goddess is so rich, you know, and often misunderstood. And I think that perhaps even later when we already discussed it, I thought that perhaps even a better title would be Mother, Seductress, Femme Fatale, The Adventures and Misadventures of the Goddess. And I think because we are basically accustomed to only one archetype of the divine feminine, which is not even called goddess very often in Western traditions. And I'm talking about only very recent Western traditions like Judo-Christianity and Islam, right? So we are basically usually referring to this kind of divine feminine as the divine mother. And of course, we all like the divine mother, because who doesn't like this all-forgiving mother figure, you know, in our lives that we always can, you know, cry on her lap, you know, and so on. But, and as a young woman, I asked myself this question, you know, do I want to be the divine mother? And my answer was, you know, absolutely not. You know, I want to explore my mind. I want to explore my sexuality. You know, and I don't want to be like virginal and pure in the way that it was defined by patriarchy. You know, I definitely wanted to explore who I am as a woman, which included my sexuality as well, not only my mind, you know. So I think that the reason why very often we are kind of hooked up on the word seductress, it is because, and seduction, it is because it's basically a response to the mother archetype. And the mother archetype is a great, you know, it's a great way, you know, like we can choose to be mothers, but I would like to stress to for all women and men actually as well, that, you know, it's a great example for women, but it's just one of many examples for a woman to be. So seductress represents like this kind of different power, which is based more on your both intellect and sexuality, interestingly. So when you look at the so-called like even before Babylon, because I don't know how much time we have, but let's say start with ancient Greece, which is actually quite recent. So even then they had heterae. Heterae was this kind of high class companion, let's put it. They didn't really call it a prostitute. And she was not only beautiful and sexually seductive, but she was highly intelligent and educated. When, you know, other Greek wives in Athens especially were locked away in the kitchen and, you know, having children, men were conversing, and it's a little bit like geisha, actually, very similar to geisha, were sexually seductive, very powerful. They considered themselves equal, although they weren't really, because it was a misogynistic society. And, you know, and they had some sexual power over men, you know, so there was this kind of charisma, which was both intellectual and sexual. And I found it very, very interesting, but and very attractive as an archetype, actually, for a young woman. And I definitely play with it, you know, and experience it as well. And there is certain power that I think especially young, attractive women, smart women can, or any women actually, but you know, when you're young, you kind of think you're hot, right? You automatically think you're hot, simply because you're young, you think you're hot, right? So that women want to experience it, because if you know that you hold this power over men. And especially in times when women had no power, it was perhaps the only power they could have. Only either as a wife and a mother, which is kind of, I'm judgmental, right? It can be boring on a long term, you know, as the only option, or perhaps as the seductress, you know, the sensual, smart woman in man's wife. So, but of course, there's a problem with this, because this basically is a very dangerous play with eros, with, you know, with the erotic life, and then first of all, you can verbalize this as well. And another thing is you can hold a sexual and intellectual power over someone only for that long. And also, and then it either dies out or degenerates into, you know, kind of a form of perversion, or in Tantra, they try to take it a little bit higher, right? But also it is not really equal either, because it's just trying to assume power over someone else rather than maybe having an equal, healthy relationship. But it is very seductive. But it's quite interesting that the word seduction didn't come into language, into use until about 16th century. Before, it was used only to, like, seduction as brainwashing, like political seduction or religious seduction. But it didn't come into life until 17th century, seduction as a sexual thing. So it's quite interesting in itself, as a word, you know, as a word. So it existed as a word, but it didn't have a sexual connotation until the 17th century, so 16th, 17th century.
Yeah. Wow, super interesting.
And if I can just continue, you can interrupt me because I'll never shut up otherwise. But if I just want to finish with the seduction here, so for example, like the strongest part of a seduction would be the femme fatale, which in French means, you know, like this charismatic woman that comes into man's life and he cannot help but completely fall for her, although he knows she's so bad for him, but he can't help it. And especially in cinema, this woman was portrayed very powerful, like Ava Gardner, for example. Ava Gardner in Killers of Bart Lancaster, or even Mrs. Smith, Angelina Jolie, classic femme fatale, right? Like, and actually even Basic Instinct, if you remember, of Sharon Stone, right? Basic Instinct, when, you know, he knows that she may kill him, but she's so sexy, she's so smart, and so exciting, he doesn't care. Right? But what I'm saying, so that's, yes, it can give you like this kind of power, you know, feeling of powerful. I'm so powerful, like, you know, he's with me anyway, because even if all of this can happen, even if I kill him and misuse him. But then at the same time, it's a very negative portrayal of what a powerful woman is. A powerful woman at the end has to be bad. And this is what the seduction femme fatale comes to in the end. At the end, she's bad. And I don't believe it has to be this way. So, you know, like, because obviously it is a power game, as I said, but she is a bad woman at the end. So as long as woman is powerful, sexually and intellectually, she's somehow bad.
Exactly.
So this is, you know, so this is what society is teaching us. So it's almost like trying to encourage us to play with our, you know, from playing with our sexuality and with our intellect and with our charisma, because you are going to adapt to be a bad woman. You know, like, this is the lesson, because in all of these films, you know, the woman is really bad at the end, you know.
And so many of our like fairy tales that were, you know, like the Wicked Witch archetype and the, you know, these are all examples of femme fatale that have kind of like where this power, like this innate like Shakti or like energy, which can be twisted to seduction, turns out bad in the end. You know, we're being made to look like this rise of power always like ends in disaster or always ends up being.
Correct. So basically, the message that society is giving us, a powerful woman is bad news. And, you know, and it's very unfortunate for men as well, because I think that men are very uncomfortable with this kind of division between, like, you have to marry Virgin Mary, except that somehow you have to have children with her, you know, although, you know, she's very virginal, right? And then you're actually attracted to a completely different woman, you know, like the Seductress time, but she's bad, you know, so it's bad for both men and women. And it's quite interesting because I belong to one chat group, which there are mostly men there, but there are some women, on Gnosis, on secret teachings, and they love this film, The Fight Club, and they love a feminine protagonist, you know, who is this really rebellious. I think Helen Bonham Carter plays her. She smokes cigarettes, she comes to men's meetings, she wears red lipstick. They say she really represents modern Mary Magdalene, and they love her, you know, because she's very equal, you know, she's sexy, she's smart, you know, she's not really bad, you know, she's just rebellious because she knows that society, you know, the way the film portrays the society, you know, she's really, you know, not that good, you know, it's basically corrupt society, so why would she fit in, right? So it's interesting that all men in this particular chat group, they are completely in love with her. So it's interesting that men also look for a different archetype of a goddess, so to speak, of an empowered woman who that is not bad necessarily, but, you know, who's an equal partner and sees the bullshit around us, you know, like she's a great discerner, you know, what's going on. Doesn't buy into what everything that society is telling her she has to be because she's a woman.
Mm. Do you think that the reverse is true, you know, with the rise of this like divine masculine movement where, you know, we're seeking both a man who is like embodied and, you know, in tune with his emotions and his vulnerability, but also has this like wildness, this like wild fuck energy in him? Do you think there is the same, do you think they're struggling? I mean, I know that your specialty is divine feminine. Do you think that the masculine is also struggling with this role of seduction and what it is to be a man also, you know, as women are going, well, what is it to be a woman? Am I like this all-giving mother? Am I like the, you know, sacred prostitute, slut kind of archetype? Or am I all of that? And can I be all of that?
Yeah, first of all, I answer first about men. There's a fantastic book, I think, spiritually, what is it? I forgot the title because I wrote a blog about it and now I just remember the name of my blog only about it, which is Evolution of Masculinity. You can check my blog. And then Zeus Ioannis, an Greek-American writer, but he's an American writer, wrote this fantastic book about spiritually evolved men. Okay, spiritually evolved men. And he says that, you know, there are different archetypes for men as well, and that men really struggle. So he says that, for example, this kind of new agey man is very often a son of, you know, like a Ronald Reagan, the kind of person that, you know, has good savings, but is kind of animal man, but, you know, it's really like misogynistic and so on, right? So he's like, and then this kind of new agey man is very often out of touch with his own masculinity because he wanted to discover, you know, his feminine side. So although he's very attractive as a friend, he may be not very sexually attractive, which is obviously frustrating for him as well, right? And he doesn't know how to assert himself in the world. So he says that there's a spiritually evolved man who asserts his sexuality, but in a loving way, you know, with one partner, you know, when he chooses one partner, he honors her as a goddess and so on, and who also have certain boundaries. So, for example, he may have only a job, you know, that is just a part-time job because another part-time job if he wants to write a book, for example, or something. So he's not buying into what society tells him how to be a powerful man, but he's also not giving up on his masculinity in the way that, you know, he's becoming subservient. Because a subservient man very quickly realizes that actually it's not very attractive for women either. Right? So they obviously struggle because they know that old archetype, what this particular Dr. Zeus discusses, is that, you know, this animal man, you know, it's just a misogynistic powerful man, you know, and it's attractive, you know, for 1 minute for a woman, right? Then there is this other type of man, I forgot what he calls this part of man, but kind of new agey man, you know, who is a very nice person, but is kind of lost in his fatherhood. You know, he's just a good father, and you know, but something is missing there. He's kind of not sexy. So then, you know, they have to learn that, you know, you have to choose, pick and choose, basically. You can keep your masculinity, but it doesn't mean that you have to threaten anyone with your masculinity. You still can be very respectful of women, and it doesn't mean that you have to buy into society's requirements for you as a man as being widely financially successful or something. But this is also, I believe, a challenge for us as women, because we maybe, you know, we want a nice man, but we want him to have the money or something. Then we have to say, if you want a man who's really balanced, like, you know, the spiritually evolved man, then, you know, there are certain things that he will not have that this kind of misogynistic man will have, which is maybe lots of power in the world. Because this man consciously chooses not to buy into this power because he knows that this power is corrupt, for example. And chooses to work on his spiritual evolution. So this is a challenge for us as women too, to understand that and to embrace it.
Absolutely. And I think I've heard them called like flow boys, you know, these like evolved kind of the last maybe 20 years or the last generation of men that have, and I know we're getting off topic, but it is pertinent to our, you know, our archetypes as women, you know, these flow boys where they're totally in touch with their feminine and they go off to drumming circles and they're our best friends and they're super lovely, but there is like an antagonistic or misogynistic quality to that also, where they haven't also embraced the feminine, and so they're doing it through practices, but not kind of loving their own inner feminine. They're searching for their own inner feminine in many ways. Yeah.
So I think as men are on the same journey, and I think it's all very positive. And obviously, because it's a journey that nobody has taken before, we are all meant to make mistakes, you know, and we have to forgive each other those mistakes, you know, and then move on, basically. And because we are all growing, right? We are all growing and we are learning, and nobody gave us an instruction book, you know, how to grow. So I just wanted to say, because I write about the feminine and the goddess, that, you know, I also have a great compassion for men. And actually, I think at least 50% of the readers of my blog are men, which is quite interesting, you know. So obviously, yeah. So I thought that it's going to be only women, but it's quite, I think maybe over 50%, and mostly men leave comments there as well. So it's quite interesting, which means they're also not only for their own search of their own masculine, feminine, but also you're interested in how women are doing this, and are extremely supportive of my blog, for example. So that's very interesting. It's very positive, I believe. Yeah.
I love to hear that. And I think, you know, although we're talking about like the feminine archetypes for us as women, you know, we're also talking about the feminine in the man. So you know, their inner feminine. So there is also, I think what brought me to have this discussion with you is like, how is this word goddess, or this, what I see out there in the you know, the mundane world, or the, you know, whatever 3D world of like a lot of like goddess workshops, and you can put on like a tinsel on your hair and you can, now you're the goddess. And I kind of would always go, oh, something doesn't smell right, it's a bit fishy.
Thank you
and
for saying this.
I never had it like,
I don't want to sound like a bitch.
I don't know if it's called new age, but you know, it's like, oh, now you can, how to become a goddess. And so how I want to reframe for you know, maybe anyone that's listening, is that it's not about becoming a goddess. You're not becoming, you are the goddess. And we need more self-undevelopment, if you like, if that's a word, I don't know, but we need to reveal our true nature rather than piling more glitter on top to make us think that we're something else. Because what happens is we get this like false goddess, like ego goddess of like, well, you know, like I'm 25, I look a certain way, now I'm a goddess. And again, that's like one person.
Easy to be a goddess when you're 25, you're gorgeous, you know, and you dress nice. But yes, I understand. And I know exactly what I mean, what you mean, and I kind of was thinking about it before our conversation. And I think that, again, we have to be kind of compassionate, because it is like everybody's in a different level. And if somebody's, for example, if this kind of workshop works for them and it actually somehow empowers them to a certain degree and they have feminine, well, let them do it. Like I, for example, have an issue because I don't run this kind of workshops. So sometimes people like, I run my workshop and people have this kind of expectations when now we are going to dance, because lots of these goddess workshops are like dancing, and it's fantastic. I love dancing too. But I mean, that's not the workshop I'm giving. You understand what and I'm not dressed up in any particular way, and we are not going to like, dance around the fire barefoot. It's all nice, but this is not a workshop that I would be giving personally. So I think that we have to be compassionate that different people want to have different experience, and that's okay. And if our entry point is going to a workshop when you dress up nicely and put flowers into your hair and so on, that's okay. And then after maybe 5 years of doing it, you think like, you know what? I have to move on. I'm tired of doing the same thing. Well, maybe I would read something about that. What are other types of goddesses? In what spiritual traditions they are? What do I want to have children or do I not want to have children? What kind of relationship I want to have with men, and actually what kind of relationship I want to have with myself? And the most important question, who am I? Yeah. And obviously it's a very complex question. And who am I? Obviously on the deepest level, we are like a soul in a super soul, we are consciousness and so on. But in this embodiment, what do I want to experience? That's why I really like, for example, philosophy that I have been following from tantric philosophy, particular tantric philosophy called Kashmir Shaivism, because it basically says that divine is on an exploration. So it's basically the divine descent into this 3D reality, as you just called it. And what do I want to experience? Okay, so maybe when you're 30, maybe you want to experience motherhood. Maybe you're 40, you may be over it. You still have to be responsible because you produce children, right? But I mean, maybe you don't want to be caught in this motherhood archetype anymore. Maybe you want to explore sexually, or maybe you explore sexually when you're young, and then you decide, been there, done that, had hot sex all my life, I think I'm ready to get married or something. So, but you have to ask yourself an honest question: what do I want to experience now? Keeping at the background that actually divine consciousness that is embodied here came here to experience this beauty and suffering. And whatever you do, it will be beautiful, and it will bring you suffering as well, because this is how it is, and especially at certain level, it's okay that people just put flowers into their hair, and maybe this is how they start to experience the inner goddess. That's perfectly fine.
I totally love that, because it is this play of consciousness. So I think that, yes, it is an inroad. So if dance, and my background is movement and embodiment. So, embodying that does reveal more of yourself, because it's like the moments of stillness in between the dance where you go, well, who am I? What am I here for? And it's that, well, I'm just here to play, right? So it's just this whole weave of like exploration to lead us back, essentially. So rather than covering up with more stuff and piling on more layers, it's about like taking layers off. And I think that embodiment also allows you to take those layers off. So it's not just anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why I completely agree with you. And that the only reason why I'm saying I'm not doing it, because I'm not good at it. Because that's not my strength. I'm just playing on my strengths, which is reading and writing, basically, right? So I'm a wild dancer. I cannot keep a rhythm or a move. I'm just a wild dancer. So I cannot definitely teach like a body work, because it would be like chaos, but it's definitely a very good embodiment of the divine feminine for people who can do this. Like you can do this. I just cannot do this. Like I can participate in a workshop, but I definitely cannot lead this kind of workshop because it's not my strength.
Right? Yeah, but you feel that perhaps through your experience.
Different way of embodying it. It's just different way of embodying. So I think any way that somebody embodies it. So I say each path is good as long as it takes you where you want to go.
Yes. Exactly. There is, that is the path. The path is like back to you. Like the most profound journey you can make is within, right? So revealing more of your true nature, more of your goddess nature. So I think I know I wanted to ask you something around this, like more diving into the archetype of like prostitution, Mary Magdalene, and how the word prostitution, or maybe how it's been used, has kind of been misinterpreted over the last whatever years.
Yeah.
Could you speak?
So it's been about 7,000 years. So it's been about 7,000 years. And I think that it comes again with misogyny. And I don't like this word patriarchy, but because some people consider it's against men, but I mean, men suffer from patriarchy as well. So I just want to stress this. But basically it comes with patriarchy, which comes with the repression of the feminine both in men and women. So the prostitute, the sacred prostitute, there's nothing like sacred prostitute actually. It's just because prostitute is really always a negative term. So, for example, the early Babylonian, Assyrian, and there's a little bit of feedback here.
Seems okay on this side.
Okay, so the early Babylonian, Assyrian, Sumerian goddesses, which is, you know, it's been pre-biblical goddesses. There are full-on primary goddesses, not anybody's wives or daughters. They're primary goddesses, so they're goddesses in their own power. They stand on their power, and they're smart and they are sexy. You know? So they're sexy. So there were temples, for example, in Babylon, Assyria, and in Sumeria, when to honor the harvesting. You know, the temples. To Inanna or Ishtar, because it's one and the same goddess, just in different countries, called different names, in different empires. So to Inanna, the priestess to Inanna would choose young, handsome men and celebrate the harvest with them, you know. So it was a little bit like actually, although nobody calls it a tantric experience, because it wasn't just, hey, young dude, let's, you know, talking to a young surfer, let's have some fun, right? It wasn't like that. It was, you know, to honor the goddess, you know, that brought the harvest and so on. So it was tantric in a sense that the focus was on using sexuality for spiritual purposes, but yet they were in power because they were the goddesses, they were the priestesses, and there was a head priestess also, not a priest, but a priestess, and they were choosing the men who had the honor to, you know, to have this tantric celebration with them. And then, you know, when the more misogynistic religions came over, they started to call them like, you know, abomination, the horse, you know, the holy horse, the holy prostitutes, you know, but it was always very sarcastic because they couldn't deal again with this power of a sexy, powerful, intelligent goddess, you know, who chose her own, and her priestesses chose their own partners at times of festivals, you know. So it wasn't an orgy of any type, you know, although, you know, for somebody not in the know, they would feel it's an orgy. The same with the tantric rituals. Some people could think it's just an orgy because we have no understanding what it really is, right? So, and so they just started to diminish it. And eventually, it's quite interesting, eventually, you know, when it got to Mary Magdalene, they started to call her prostitute, but as I was always stressing in my talks, she was not called a prostitute until the 6th century when Pope Gregory, what is called Gregory the Great, not that great because he made a scriptural mistake, or she was misogynistic, and he confused her with another woman called Sine, and even that woman was not a prostitute, and started to call Mary Magdalene prostitute. And we know from other gospels that were rejected, so-called Gnostic gospels, that Mary Magdalene was definitely a partner of Jesus. We don't know if she was his wife or not, but she was representation of the divine feminine in Jesus' life. And all of his gospels were rejected, but not until the 4th century. So somehow the figure of Mary Magdalene as a prostitute was connected to these other earlier goddesses of Babylon, Sumeria, and Assyria, who, you know, so I actually argue that I think she's the same, one and the same goddess that basically reincarnates herself in a subconscious mind. So that's my argument in my blog, right? Because it's quite interesting that there's a whole series of goddesses, Nimna first, Inanna, Ishtar, Isis, and then Mary Magdalene that have, we don't have time to discuss it, you can check my blog, that have exactly the same qualities. They're represented exactly in the same way, in a pictorial way. They have exactly the same story. They resurrect the young god. I mean, give me a break. It's the same goddess. It's quite funny, as I was preparing for this talk, I was reading some tantric work because I thought we would have time to discuss it, but I think we're already over time. And I realized that for a tantric ritual, what a yogi is supposed to do, he's supposed to put a crimson red beautiful fabric on the ground with a skull on it. And obviously the red and the skull is a symbolism for Mary Magdalene. Isn't it interesting? It's always portrayed with the skull because it's resurrection and also do not attach to this body, it's kind of spiritual actually symbolism. And the red is actually red rose or red dress, or it's actually a symbolism for Mary Magdalene. And all of this God, and there are other symbolisms that come with this gods, including Tantra, in India. So I think like there is this particular one goddess, this lineage of goddesses that actually seem to exist everywhere and has the same symbolism everywhere. And it's associated with the so-called sacred prostitute, in fact, except that she was never a prostitute. She was just empowered sexually and spiritually.
And could you maybe think around that? I think we've got feedback a little bit around, this sacred prostitute of prostitution is not necessarily how it became like the shadow side of prostitution. I guess that's the best way of explaining it, that we get something from it. It's like a feeding power system where if we seduce and we get something, the fire burns out. We were talking about it earlier. Like you can build this fire of like seduction, of power in your body, but everything dissolves essentially. So in the way of, Mary Magdalene, for example, that was called a prostitute, or this sacred prostitution, the burnout that happens, this misogynistic view, I don't know if I'm making sense here, but like this misogynistic view of prostitution being a feeding system, that we're going to get something as opposed to just be something. So just be in our power, just be in this goddamn sexual energy, as opposed to like, I need to get something from it.
So I think there are 2 points that you touched upon, and if I'm wrong, just please correct me. So one is that, if we just use, forget even the prostitution, but if we use seduction for something, then it's still a control, it is still power game. And Eros eventually, very wise Yogini told me, Eros can last only that long. Doesn't matter how beautiful you are, how smart you are, how seductive you are. Eventually, it will wear off. Like everything, as you said, eventually will go. So you have to take it higher, or you have to let it go. And Tantra allows us to take it higher, right? So because it's still a control game, which is basically still an ego game. It's not a spiritual play of consciousness. It is an ego game. It has to wear off. And probably you caught some fire too, because unless you're completely psychopathic cold woman, you will eventually fall for the man too, right? Unless you just are happy to manipulate somebody for the rest of your life, which is horrible, whether you're a man or a woman, right? So it's still play of the ego. So this is one thing that, Eros will wear off eventually. So you have to do something with it. You have to decide what I'm going to do with this Eros, because it's good as an initial play. And I actually encourage people to be seductive, but it's an initial play in a relationship or in a country. It's up to you how you want it to be, but be clear about it. If you want to be a seductress for a life, then you cannot then ask a man, marry me and have children with me, because then it's a different archetype. Unless you both agree, we are moving on to a different archetype now. So
exactly. So seduction is a lifestyle.
Yeah. And also there's the thing of seduction, which is in the goddess Sophia, which is a Gnostic goddess, that basically tells the story of the divine falling into matter, and she forgets who she is. And she starts to prostitute herself. Like she, for example, gets a job and completely identifies with this. Or she becomes a mother and completely identifies with this. So in this way, we prostitute ourselves as divine beings who forget that we are divine beings. And we think that all we are these people, this person with this particular job, this person who is a wife or a husband of this particular other person. So it's still an ego game. So once we get involved in some kind of ego game and we identify with that game, like for example, we lose a job, which gives us all prestige. And it happens very often to a man especially, right? Or a woman when a divorce happens that she didn't want because she was, a woman, a wife of a successful man. People collapse. But it's actually a great spiritual lesson, however horrible, because this was an illusion. This is not who you are. This happens to show you that you are so much more. So this is like a spiritual version of prostitution. You're prostituting yourself because you believe you are that, this good job, you know, or this particular position in society. Did I explain it?
Absolutely, and that's what I would say. It's like the piling on of stuff, and it's like the false or it's the ego being piled up, and then when this something happens, you know, like we use the role of seduction to light the fire initially, but then we can't keep sustaining that. We keep piling stuff on, having to be something rather than, you know, wind it back. So I think, you know, these, you know, like you said, divorce or heartbreak or loss of finances actually gives one the opportunity to come back to center and come back to stillness and reveal what is actually there, reveal this true nature. So yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm probably going on off topic, but yeah, this seduction is just the bit you need to get things started. But if you live it as a lifestyle full time, something's not quite right. You know, seduction is not a lifestyle
for the rest of your life. But then, you know, but even this is not proper, because eventually you will age, you know, and obviously, you know, there are many beautiful older women, but, you know, eventually, you know, your body will give up on you, you know. It's very difficult to be a seductress, you know, at the, I don't want to, but I mean, like, I hope I can evolve beyond this archetype. Why do I have to seduce men? It means that I'm somehow not empowered unless I have to continuously seduce men. When, you know, I can play a seductress for a while in my life, and for example, I did too, like many women, and I feel like I took it to the limit and I'm done with it. You know, I can play a different archetype now, right? So, because otherwise, you know, it's a nice experience, but, you know, why do I have to play the same experience over and over again? You know, it's just an experience. It's just a play of consciousness. So you were a seductress for a while. Okay, what's next? Yeah, why do you have to? Because then it becomes an addiction.
Yeah.
It's like a sexual addiction or like addiction to power even. You know, like, and no, addiction is good, because addiction is a attachment of the ego to something, because it gives you this sense of power. So then you have to move on from one relationship to another because you have to prove to, you know, yourself that you still got it. Do I still have it? It's sad. Of course I have. I don't need you, you know, to, you know, seduce somebody to know, you know, who I am.
It's like coming to your edges, and I think that, you know, often in today's society we've lost a lot of rites of passage around that too. So you know, we stay in perhaps like a mother archetype, or maybe, you know, like maiden archetype, and then we come into mother archetype, but we don't want to, like, no one wants to talk about the crone, or no one wants to, they go, well, I just don't want to, I'm never going to be that. And I go, well, it just is, right? That you are that.
Right? Yeah. So this is, I really, you know, do not appreciate that, and you know, because I think even the name crone is so negative in a way. You know, again, it's a misogynistic, because like, who really wants to be a crone? But I like, and I really am looking forward to it, and I'm hoping to embody it, and you know, even as soon as I can, you know, the archetype of a wise woman. You know, so it's basically a crone, but you know, I choose to give it a different name. You know, I'm not a crone. I want to be a wise woman. You know, I want to share all of my experiences, you know, and everything, the knowledge, you know, that I accumulated, and perhaps with, you know, help of people around me, turn it into wisdom, so we can all grow together and so on. This is, for me, at this stage, I don't know any better, at this stage, the highest archetype that I would like to embody. Much better than in some, I've been a young maiden, and, you know, it was nothing but a heartache. You know, one bloody drama after another. Honestly, never again, you know, like, even if I embody again, you know, I'm done it. I took it to the limit, you know, it was great, and, you know, what a waste of energy. If I didn't do it, you know, I would have a Nobel Prize for something now. You know, all of the energy that went to relationship, you know, and so on. And I don't regret it, because, you know, I made those choices. However, I'm done with it. And I think that as we age, we have to look at it, you know, who do I want to be? What is my contribution? Am I going to pretend that I'm 16, you know, and doesn't mean that you cannot be attractive and sexy. I absolutely disagree with this. You can be attractive and sexy at any age, you know, but that's not my focus anymore. My focus is, you know, I want to leave some legacy. I hope I contributed positively somehow to this, you know, but I have an opportunity to contribute to the world around me, you know, that perhaps I can share what I have learned and experienced. That's an archetype of a wise woman, and I claim it. I don't know if I will be successful with it or not, whether anybody likes what I'm saying, but I claim it for myself as my own experience, you know. And if somebody wants to call it a crone, I think, you know, if it's a negative kind of connotation, then I think you have a problem, because you have a problem with a woman to be wise, you know, a woman who chooses to be wise, you know, who chooses to be empowered. So I don't like the word crone, but a wise woman, I take it anytime. Give it to me. Yeah? Give it to me, I'll run with it. That's all I have.
I love that. I love that you've like played all the realms.
And it takes age, because you know, it's not only what you have learned like from you know, some courses or universities, but it takes experience. It takes experience to get to be wise. That's why I said I'll never be 20 or 30 or 40 again, because it would drive me crazy, you know, like now. Yeah, I've done it, you know. It was great, and I'm done.
It is the privilege of a lifetime to like become this wise woman. I'm not triggered around crone. I quite like the word. I'm like trying for my hair to go grey. It's just not going quickly grey enough. You know, I kind of like, yeah, I love the idea too. And it is the privilege of going, oh my gosh, I have like been the maiden and the mother. And it's like, you get to like be all of those. You're all of those at any one time anyway. But to the importance of experiencing that, I think, to truly embody those, like you said, you did, like you fully went there, like go, wherever you are, go there fully. So if you're going to be the seductress, go there fully.
You know. And I also got burned, you know, and wisely so, because, you know, you have to learn. I think there's this song by Leonard Cohen, is something, just because I love you for your body doesn't mean that you make a fool of me. Yeah, so this is like a man's response to it, right? Like, and you know, eventually it will wear off, and it does, you know, or you continue and you get burned, you know, because you catch your own fire, so to speak. Right?
Yeah.
So, but I think like for women, I would say, and for anybody, but we're talking about the divine feminine, you know, just choose wisely, choose your archetypes, you know, wisely, and ask yourself, what do I want to experience? For example, as I say, mother is a great archetype, but I think everybody goes for it. But you have to ask yourself, do I really want to experience this? Because it's a long commitment. Right? So people think, oh, I'm like 28 or I'm 36, oh my God, you know, like I have an hour and never, you know, but you have to ask yourself, do you really want to experience it? Or is it just a biological clock? Or is it, if it's a deep spiritual longing, you know, love longing from your heart, go for it. But if you think that you have to do this because you're a particular age and because it's a biological clock, you just have to meditate upon it, you know. Is it an archetype that you want to experience? It's not something that you have to do simply because you can. You know what I mean? And because it's a commitment, you know, it's a huge responsibility. Yeah?
It's a forever. And I think I want to ask you, how important do you think it is to decide, and you've just said that a little bit, like to sit in the stillness and really find your own inner archetype or whatever, sit with that, allow that to arrive rather than to chase it. So it's kind of like not an external experience that we try on, it's an internal experience. Yeah. I've got to fly here, of being that archetype.
Yes, yeah, that's good. But I don't want to self-promote myself here, but that's why I did this manifest journaling to manifest the Lost Goddess in your life little workbook, because I think that meditation, I love meditation and I'm committed to meditation for like the last 25 years. But I think that sometimes with things like that, when things are very intense, especially around choices like motherhood, you know, or so on, do I want to choose it? It's very good to journal. Let it flow, because, you know, without any judgments, let it out. And when you think like, I'm just sick and tired of the same thing showing up all the time in my journaling, you know, and you have to realize, why is it really important? Do I really want it? Or is it because my mother is telling me to do it? Because, you know, why, you know, is it a real need, or am I just afraid that I will be alone? Or, you know, because why, you know, why do I really want it? You know, what do I truly want to experience? You know, what I want to manifest in my life. And if it comes really strongly and you search, then absolutely go for it, you know. But what I think that people just follow, both men and women follow certain archetype, which is just one of many possible archetypes for us. And then, you know, everybody suffers at the end, right? Especially children, right? when it was just like happened to them because they didn't know what else to do because they're a certain age and they thought like, oh, I guess you know, do the regular thing, right? So I would say meditation definitely, but I said even before meditation and then journaling, then meditation, you know, whatever works for you. And because then you have to, meditation is calming down, but you also have to allow the flow, thoughts that are flowing through your mind, you have to allow them to come out, you know, and you have to acknowledge them, and you have to say, what voice is telling me to do this and which voice is telling me not to do this, you know, because we have so many voices in our heads, right? And so this is basically what it means to me to live consciously, you know, like you look into it, and sometimes we can make even a bad decision, and that's fine, but at least we really try to approach it in a conscious way. This is all we can do. This is all that is in our power. You know, try to approach it in a conscious way and with integrity and compassion towards ourselves. You know, and even if it turns out to be a bad decision, then we are the ones that pay the consequences. So, you know, we still have to have compassion for that, right, for ourselves. But at least give it some thought, give it some meditation, you know, rather than just doing whatever everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, give it the stillness. And yeah, you know, we take on so much of our conditioning around, you know, what is our sexual conditioning from our mum and dad, from society, from our upbringing. So when you're talking about, you know, what is our seduction and sexual flavor, well, what is it? We need to set the stillness of that to know ourselves before we like put on a mask of what we think it is. So, you know, meditation and journaling, and, you know, dance to some extent, but not dancing to be something, but dancing to find something, or
express who you are.
Yeah, very, very important for women. I think, you know, just the way our energy body move. I know we could talk forever, and I think we're way over time. So definitely part 2 to this. So before we head off for today, I want to ask you, what do you have coming up for as far as lectures or any offerings that you could let us know about?
Okay, I just gave a series of lectures. I'm not doing any lectures at the moment. I'm just waiting for invitations. But I would encourage people, if they are interested in what I was saying, to visit my Goddess News blog. If you just type on Google Goddess News, this is my blog. You know, it's the first thing that comes up, right? So this would be that. And if you, for example, say that you participated in this talk with me and Natalie, then also I can send you a PDF of my little workbook. It's a tiny workbook, you know, journaling to find the lost goddess in your life, you know. So I'm happy to do this, but it's just a PDF, so you have to print it out because the book is out of my control. It's on Amazon, you know, and so, but I can do this for you. But I would really encourage you, if you're interested, to stay in touch with me via my Goddess News blog, and if you're happy to sign up to the newsletter or to the blog, so it's Goddess News blog, because it's probably difficult. Yeah, so it's probably difficult to remember my name. Or you can stay in touch with me also via Facebook as Dr. Joanna Kujava. I'm on Facebook. I have a public page because I love to connect with people. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put all the links below anyway, so it'll make it super easy for everyone. It's been super delightful. This conversation is like well overdue. As I said, I've been like following your work for, you know, for some time, and you know, you give, as I said to you earlier before we got on camera, you give me the language that I do the interpretive dance for. So
you see this? I would love to see your workshop.
Yeah, there's the, you know, I'm able to give it through very subtle embodied aspects, I guess, when I'm working with women, but you give it like the, you know, here's the truth, like this is close to the truth, here's the truth, here's the research, here's the all the, you know, hours of spiritual detective work that you've done, which I love to share, you know, this ancient wisdom, which is, you know, so relevant for us across all time, space, and dimension. So thank you. I'm so excited to have had you on this talk, and look forward to chatting to you very soon again.
Thank you so much.